I have a lot of thanks for Constance, who sends out many email blasts to get people to attend. I think this is a pretty important workshop. We all know that we're in a pretty serious drought. And one of the ways we can conserve water here in Benicia is by reducing our outdoor water use, which in Benicia is just over half the water of a typical home is used outdoors. So installing a simple laundry to landscape graywater system is a really great way to reduce our water use. And we can reuse the water in our laundry system to irrigate our plants and our lawn. So today, Bob from Gray to Green is going to talk to us about how to install one of these simple systems, and he can answer all your questions. He has some demonstration materials up here, and then at the end, many of you have already signed up, but you're eligible for a free kit which has all of the components that you need to install a system on the inside of your house, and he'll talk to you about how to install all those different components. I should have mentioned at the beginning too, my name is Alex. I've talked to many of you on the phone or in email, and I'm actually a contractor with the city helping it to implement its climate action plan, which is a pretty large document that helps the city to conserve water and energy and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So I'm happy that we can put this on for residents.
So are you going to drive, Alex? Or?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Tell me when you're ready.
I'm ready.
Okay.
So this is what we're going to cover. Basic overview of what graywater is, the code requirements, because the state of California just allowed this, the reuse of graywater, strangely enough, about 5 years ago. We'll go over the laundry landscape system, have some plant-friendly products you can use on your laundry, then the indoor system installation. Then we'll take a little break, because I did bring coffee, and I'll hang out in the break. If you guys have questions, I've got a mock-up unit up here. It's pretty good to look at. Then we'll go through estimating how much graywater you're going to produce, designing the outdoor irrigation system, installation, and then how you finish up the system. So that's basically what it's going to do. So what is graywater? It's water, the state of California says it's water from showers and baths, washing machines, lavatory sinks, and bathroom sinks, which essentially are the same. But it's not from kitchen sinks in California, and it's not from toilets, or if you're running diapers or something soiled, that has to go down the sanitary sewer.
Could you just talk briefly too about the need for a building permit for this particular system, or not?
Actually, this does not need a permit. There's only one location I've found that they require a permit. According to California Building Code, you do not need a permit. The reason for that is, in this system, you do not cut into the building's existing plumbing. This is a total separate unit. Okay? So, by using graywater, depending upon how much laundry you do and what kind of machine you have, you can reduce by 14 to 40%. That's a big number. You can save energy, and the energy in California used to transport, clean, and treat water is 19% of the total electrical production of the state of California. 19% just for water. Seems like a huge number, but it's up there, so you have to believe it. If I put that on the internet, you know it would be true. Anybody here on septic? Everybody's on sewer? Well, if you were on septic, you can take this off your septic system. And it has a tendency to promote healthier products just by the soaps you use, because they are biodegradable. They don't put such a strain on the environment. You can use this to irrigate crops. Fruit trees are great. Gardens are great. And then the local food production. Most plants really thrive on graywater because the soaps that are in it actually are nutrients to the plants. Next. So how can you use graywater? Well, the laundry and landscape irrigation we're covering today. You can use other household fixtures, which I'll talk briefly about. So like I said, the tubs, the showers, everything but the kitchen sink. Everything but the kitchen sink, how about that? But you can't use it for indoor use. You can't use it for flushing toilets or whatever you would use it for inside the house. And that's according to California. So this is what the code says. So you got to have the following. A way to reroute the water from the landscape to the sanitary sewer. In case you're doing something, oily rags, bleach, dirty diapers if you're washing them, if anybody washes diapers anymore. Those can't go into the system, so you have to have a way to take it from the sewer to the system, and that's what the three-way valve does, which we'll go over in a few minutes. It's got to be properly labeled. We'll go over that too. And it's got to be discharged, this is really important, a minimum of 2 inches below the surface of the ground. So you can't flood the surface, that's not legal. So what we do is we discharge it under what we call a mulch field into a mulch pit. And the mulch field is basically a valve box, if you've ever seen those, but there's some examples up here. It's got to be directed irrigation or disposal field, which is the mulch pits in this case. There are some required setbacks, which we'll go over. It's supposed to minimize contact with human or animals, but because it's 2 inches below ground and you're doing it in a mulch pit, that's all taken care of. Unless your dog digs out the mulch pit, then, you know. And it's got to have a maintenance manual with the system. And that's a very simple one-page piece of paper in your kits.
I just wanted to mention too that this checklist is available online so that you all can see the different requirements your system has to comply with. It's also part of the packet that I handed out today. There aren't any left, but I'm happy to direct you to where you can see that online or send you a copy.
So what else does the code say? It's got to be below the surface. You can't let it pond or run off. But 2 inches below the surface through the mulch shields into the mulch pit covers that. You can't have a connection to the potable water supply. So your drinking water can't be interconnected to this. Not a problem with this unless you want to put it into the hose and suck it into your house, but I don't recommend it. It can't contain a pump. The reason it can't contain a pump is they're afraid if you've got pressure on the system that somehow it's magically going to get into the water system. That's just a state requirement. You can't alter the existing plumbing, which is why it doesn't need a permit. And you can't violate other codes or laws. So unless you have a card, you can't use this to irrigate your marijuana. Sorry. And you can't store it. Law says it's got to be dispersed within 24 hours. Also, within 24 to 48 hours, gray water actually becomes septic, and it really smells bad. So you don't want to store it, but with this system, there's no facility to store it. And it can't contain fecal matter, food matter, or hazardous chemicals. The food matter is why they don't want the kitchen sinks. So this is a setback requirement. So it's got to be dispersed 2 feet from buildings, meaning you can run your trunk line right along the building, but when you dig your mulch pit, it's got to be 2 feet. 1.5 feet away from property lines. You can't give your neighbor all your gray water. 100 feet from wells, creeks, ponds, lakes, or any other body of water, including the bay out here. This doesn't apply to any of you guys, but it's got to be. No, we don't want to restart the computer. Got to be 5 feet from any septic tank, 4 feet from the septic tank leach field, and 3 foot above the groundwater table. None of those are generally a problem. Ran into one installation in Santa Rosa where the only place they could discharge it was 90 feet from a creek. Couldn't get to the 100, so they couldn't do it. So these are some other systems that you can put in. Branch drain system basically goes out and you have a way to separate gray water into 2 different fields. It's pretty rare that somebody wants to do that, or there are some systems where people want to do that. It's from showers and sinks. It's got to be gravity flow. And it's always best to do this stuff as close to your house as possible, just because you don't want to be shooting it all that way. There are certain manufactured systems that we call them whole house systems, where they'll actually collect water from all the sources I mentioned before. They do have a tank or a pump, tank and a pump, so they've got to be permitted. And because you're altering the building's plumbing, they need to be permitted. And if you've got a pump on your line, your water line into your house, you have to have a backflow preventer. And something I learned about backflow preventers is they've got to be checked once a year. What can you use on the plants? Well, things you shouldn't use on the plants. Salt, sodium compounds, those are usually used to fluff up the soap, volume in a dry powder. They serve no purpose other than make you think you're getting more product for your money. Boron, borate, chlorine bleach, really bad for pretty much anything. And then most fabric softeners are not good for your plants. They do contain some of these elements. However, there are some fabric softeners that are fine. Alex? So, what can you use? Laundry soaps. Costco just changed the name of Ecos to, I think it's a Kirkland brand now, but it's the same thing. Trader Joe's has a liquid laundry soap. Method, believe it or not, is available at Bed Bath & Beyond and Whole Foods. BioClean laundry liquid is available at Whole Foods. And those are just a few. I mean, there's new bio soaps coming out almost on a weekly basis. Citrus Magic, which is basically an orange-based cleaner. A lot of the cleaners are going to a citrus-based. It's biodegradable, it's natural. They're also using it for termite abatement. So it's really good stuff. There's another non-chlorine bleach at Whole Foods. And then down here that you can't see is OxyClean. OxyClean does have a little salt in it, but it's not very much, and it's diluted by the amount of water in the system. So this is a three-wave diverter valve. This allows us, in this case, it's going to the landscape. I move it this way, it's going to the sanitary sewer. This is mounted near your washing machine. I've got pictures of various installations. So you want this to be right where your washer is. So mine is right behind my washing machine. So if I want to change, I just reach over. Well, Pat reaches over and changes it. On the valve, you guys probably can't see it, but you can come up and rake. There's a little L. Whatever direction this arrow is pointing, it's coming in from here. This one's going out that way. I turn it, and it's pointing this way. That's how you know which way the water's flowing. Now, sure you guys can't see it, but you can come up with the brake and take a look at it. Then you got this device. This is an anti-siphon valve. Under certain situations, you can actually siphon water out of your washing machine as it's filling. So that's what this anti-siphon valve is good. It's called an auto vent, a vacuum breaker, and I'll use this one. I got a call one time that says my auto vent's broken because I blow into it, nothing happens. Well, yeah, it's not made to do that. It's made to stop the suction. So if suction comes down on here, this is going to let air in and relieve that suction. You got your sewer connection right here. I use a flex pipe on every one of mine because it's easier, and this guy's just fine. The black tubing is just fine. And then you've got your gray water, which that pipe is in my garage, and it comes out of here and then connects into your system outside the house, and everything just flows in. Any questions about? See, what did I forget? Oh, everything is 1-inch PVC pipe. That's not a code requirement, but that's what everybody I know who does this recommends, because that way it's not going to clog. So this is basically how you connect the thing. You've got your three-way valve. You've got a couple of slip to male pipe threads, or as MPT as we call it in the business. One goes to sewer, one goes to landscape. This is supposed to be your hose from the washing machine, even though in that demonstration it's a 1-inch pipe. You don't have that. Then you've got this, you've got this barb connection here. This goes onto your washing machine hose, right here. And then you do need to hose clamp only 2 places in the system, because the only place that's under pressure is coming out of your washing machine and going into the sewer. So you only need to hose clamp both of those. Everything else doesn't need a hose clamp because it's not under pressure. And then schedule 41-inch PVC. Then this is the only part that varies in the system. Like I said, a newer machine will have a 3/4 inch coming off. An older machine will have a 1-inch. Most all of them are 3/4 inch nowadays, unless you've got something that's very old, say 20 years. Then you need a 1-inch connection. If you need, the kits come with a 3/4. If you need a 1-inch, you can contact myself or Alex and I'll mail one out to you. Okay? Yep. Couple things about connecting the valve. If you know this, I'm sorry, but I go through this every time. You do want to put some Teflon tape on the threads, just to make sure you get a good seal. And you don't want to cross-thread them. So, everybody know what cross-threading is? No. It's when you don't get the threads connected properly, and so they can go in cockeyed, especially when you've got a metal to a plastic fitting. One way to avoid that is you spin it backwards, and you'll hear it seat, you'll hear it click in. This is good. Must be a defective part. And then it screws in. Just rotate it backwards, you'll hear it click, then gently turn it. You shouldn't have any resistance at all. If you've got resistance, then you've got to cross-thread it. And you do want to tighten it fairly tight, but not put a lot of effort into it. Otherwise, you'll just strip this out of the valve. So it's got to be snug. Oh, and putting the Teflon tape on. I always used to get this backwards. If you hold the fixture facing you, you rotate it clockwise. And what that'll do is that's going in the same direction as your threads. If you do it the other way, as you screw it in, the Teflon tape comes off.
Say that again.
You hold the threads facing you, then you wrap in a clockwise motion. So that'll keep, if you do it the other way, as you screw this in, the tape's going the same direction, so the tape just backs off. So, like I said, there's a lot of ways to do this. These are different installations. This one's just going in a laundry sink. That is the connection to sanitary sewer. Before this, the washing machine hose just went into there. And hopefully they tied it down, otherwise they had a wet laundry room. This is a three-way configuration. This is coming up from the washer. This is going out to the sewer. Now this one's necked down a little bit. Really don't recommend that. It should be a full 1 inch. And then this goes out the sanitary sewer. You've got your auto vent, three-way valve, clamps, making sure the thing's secure. And this perfect installation is the one at my house. So I recommend putting the valve upside down, going into the top. The reason for that is that's the same way it goes into your sewer. If you do it this way, then you do put a little back pressure on the pump because it's got to hit here and go that way. This way it just comes up and it's allowed to fall in and go either direction. So I recommend, compared to everybody else, the upside down way. So a couple things. The valve's got to be above the flood rim, which is this right here. And you really want to put it up here where you can get at it. Washer hose has to be connected here because it's going to go this way or this way. If you try to connect it here, then it's going to go that way and will never go that way. It's just the way the valves are constructed. Teflon tape on the threads, PVC glue on the slip joint connections. If you've ever installed a sprinkler system, that's basically what you're doing here. Same general concept. Now, sometimes making this connection can be a little difficult just because it is a tight fit. So all you got to do is heat up some water, microwave it, whatever, or wait till it warms up but catch that extra water. And that'll let this thing expand a little bit, and then you can get it on the barb. Then you hose clamp it. And make sure you put a hose clamp on that connection. There are 2 hose clamps provided with the kit because that's under pressure. The building, you do have to get it outside. There's a number of different ways to do this. My washer's in the garage, so it's about 4 feet lower, 3-4 feet lower than the floor. So I just went out under the house, and I'm on a slope, so I do the front yard. So I just went under the house, out through the front, and then distributed Graywater. But there's all this stuff in the walls. You know, things like gas lines, water lines, electrical lines, studs. And so what you want to do is you want to take, and before you drill that hole, you just take a very tiny bit and drill 4 holes 90 degrees apart to make sure there's nothing in there. There's also clues if there's stuff in there. You know, if you've got an electrical outlet for your washer, you probably don't want to drill right next to that. You see the pipes coming up from your washer or the gas line, you need to kind of stay away from those. But if you're drilling through and you just got sheetrock, it should go very easy. If you hit anything, feel resistance, you're not in the right place. Probably the second most important component in the system, because it does do that vacuum breaker. So it's always installed on the landscape side of the system. Because over here in the sewer, if you go home and you look at your washing machine, there's an air gap in here. You know, it's not a tight connection. It's the hose going into there with some air gap around it. That functions as the auto vent for the sewer side. So over here, you want to put the auto vent on the landscape side. It's also got to be at the highest point in the system. You can see here's the main line. This goes out to the landscape. Stop it. And then up here, the auto vent is higher. It does not have to be that much higher. You can actually put it down here. But I needed to stick this sticker on, so I used a bigger piece of pipe. And it's got to be visible and accessible, because eventually they can go bad. So if you've got a problem where it's leaking, whatever, you want to be able to get to it. You want to be able to see it before it'll cause a problem. Okay. So real quick on assembling the auto vent. The auto vent is an 1.5 inch piece, and you need to go back to the 1 inch. So in the kit, you've got the auto vent. It's this black thing here. And then you've got an 1.5 inch threaded to slip fit. So the auto vent goes on top, and then you've got this adapter. The outside's 1.5 inch, the inside's 1 inch. That gets cemented in the bottom, and then you've got your 1 inch for your PVC pipe. And then there is a T in the kit. This is actually backwards from what I demonstrated, but this is your connection from the washing machine. This goes out the landscape, and this is just generally air for the auto vent to give it some volume. Like I said, it does not need to be very long. This piece of pipe is probably about 3 inches. So, cutting the PVC pipe. You can use a handsaw. I used a handsaw for years until I went to Home Depot and got myself one of these, which is a real nice ratcheting connection. It's got a blade on it, the pipe fits in here, so it just ratchets down. Makes it pretty easy to cut the pipe. I think this was about $12 maybe. Well worth the money. Then because I do quite a bit of this stuff, I also have, this is basically a pipe cutter, but it works fantastic for PVC. It's made from metal, but you put your 1 inch in there, move this a couple down so it's tight, spin it around, tighten it up, spin it around, tighten it up, and it cuts right through the pipe. All these directions are on the can of PVC cement. One other thing is I do recommend you wear vinyl gloves when you're doing this. If you read the back of the PVC solvent, you won't even buy it. It's very toxic. That's that typically purple stuff that everybody gets all over their hands. I have before. And the glue is better, but not much better. So you just go and you get a pair of vinyl surgical gloves or a box of vinyl surgical gloves. I think they're like $5 at Costco. So it's just a good practice. So you apply the glue first to this guy. Then you apply it to pipe. See, I didn't cement this. That's what happens. Then you put it on here, push it in, and rotate about 90 degrees. What that does is that gets any bubbles out. So it gives you a little better fit. It's not 100% required, but it's just a good practice. And then you want to hold it until it'll say on the jar, a can of glue, but generally about 30 seconds is what I like to do. Reason for that is this is actually a tapered fitting, so it is possible for this guy to back out. Probably not going to happen, but holding it for 30 seconds is not going to kill you. So connection to sanitary sewer. Here you can see the arrow on the valve. So right now, because this is coming down this way, it's coming in here and it's going that way. If I turn this valve this way, then the arrow is going to be going this way. So that's the way the water is going to go. You can see the arrow on the valves pretty plainly when you're not so far away. This is the air gap I was talking about. That's your anti-siphon valve on the sewer side. In the kit, you've got some threaded elbows and some slip elbows. You want to use the threaded elbows for this connection because you're going to screw in one of these guys. And then for any change of direction you need to use in the rest of the system, well, in between there and the outside, you want to use the slip ones. Then on the outside, you also want to use a threaded because you'll have another one of these hose barbs coming out. And like I said, that's the other connection that needs a hose clamp because that is a pressurized portion of the system. So you do want to strap this guy down. It will work non-strap for a while, and then you bust a pipe. So you can either find a stud behind the wall, and there's 2 pipe clamps in here. You can either find a stud behind the wall if you're lucky enough to have one, or you can put a piece of blocking. This is a 2x4. The 2x4 goes into the studs, and then you can put your pipe clamps anywhere. And then every couple of weeks, every month, you want to exercise the valve because it doesn't stick, but it gets sticky, even though it's got a PTFE seal on it, which is Teflon-like thing, Teflon-like material. It will have a tendency to stick up. In fact, before I put kits together, I move every valve because they are a little stuck. So all the kits you have been exercised, the valve's been exercised last week, so they should be good for a little while. Okay. Now labeling. There's a number of ways you can label a system. You can write on the pipe. You can put signs. You can put a high-tech drawing. But as part of the kit, there's this piece of paper. This qualifies as system instructions because it says, it's got a Graywater System 3-way valve. But you guys can't see it. But on this side, it says handle here for landscape, handle here for sewer. But brilliantly, if you turn it over, it says handle here for sewer, handle here for landscape. So whichever way you're going, whichever way you set the valve, just hang it the right side. You do need to label the pipe. And in the kit also is a nifty label. It says non-potable water. This satisfied. You may want to put it on where you exit the house also. I think the code says it's got to be every 5 feet. You can use a Sharpie, just right on the white pipe. non-potable water, don't drink, don't use for cooking, whatever. A bunch of different installations. I didn't do all of these. I'm happy to say I didn't do some of them. But, you know, this was a stackable. So in order to get to it, they had to move it out to the side. So they did this situation. Now, this goes back to the sewer. It's not really visual. And that goes out to landscape. So this is coming out of the machine here. Oh no, this one goes back to sewer, I'm sorry. Then you've got this guy on the side, your washing machine, your sewer, out to the landscape. I have no idea why they did this in this one. But they decided to make it a work of art. Same with this one. I would have done this a little bit different. I would have turned the valve 90 degrees and just gone this way. This is also an interesting, you want to make it as simple as possible. We'll go through the outside portion. Tell you guys how to figure out how much water you actually generate for your system. What plants are good? How do you get there? Been a lot of questions about how do I get it out to my landscape? What you need to prepare the landscape and the outside code requirements. Alex?
Yes.
Quit texting, stop it. So how are you going to estimate your gray water production? If you've got an older machine, and very old, probably more than 15 years old, 30 to 50 gallons a load. That's why they made the machines water saving. And you figure that sounds like a lot, but if you figure you fill 3 times, you fill and empty that tub. It's a tub, right? Yeah. Your washing machine tub for every cycle.
Yeah.
You got to fill it to wash.
Yeah.
You drain that. You've got your spin cycle that it goes through to help rinse. Then it goes back through again and refills for the rinse. If you've got one of the newer front-loading machines, you're looking at 12 to 25 gallons. 12 is the ultra water saver. Typically, they're closer to 20 gallons is a good average. It should be in your instruction manual, but all of us guys threw those away anyway. So you just take your number of loads per week times your gallons per load, and that gives you your weekly gray water production. Now, a lot of people say, well, I don't do my wash every day. Well, that's taken care of by actually the mulch basins, which I'll get to a little later. Then you got to figure, you know, how much does your house produce, and could this change? Like I said, both my boys are home from college right now. So I'm using a lot of water, and my food bill is incredible. So that's going to change. You know, now we're probably doing 8, 9 loads because they do their own laundry, so who knows how much they use. Yeah?
I have 2 girls and it's the same.
Yeah.
Girls are the same as boys, it's just as fun.
Yeah, I know, because when my sons were younger and still at home, their friends would come over, and the girls were the first ones to go to the snack cabinet. And they weren't shy, they'd just go over and help themselves. Okay? Is everybody clear on that? Pretty simple math? No trig involved? Yeah, well, you know, that's where I'm from. It's probably pretty close to the same here. There's probably some guidelines as far as what it is, but you guys aren't, I mean, this area is not that much different from Sonoma County.
But the thing about a drought tolerant shrub, it may need that much water on average per week, but it doesn't want it every week.
Right.
So
you can,
you don't actually want to be watering so like it's drought tolerant once a week.
you don't want to be watering much. You can really neck those down with a valve, so it's getting a very small amount of water.
But they really like to be deeply watered about once every 3 weeks. So it's a different,
Yeah, then that one probably, you wouldn't want on the system.
yeah,
You may want to water that with a bucket out of your shower.
yeah.
So, you got a smaller, medium-sized tree, probably 20 to 30 gallons a week, something like an elm or a liquid amber, a big fruit tree. Then, medium-sized shrub, 10 to 20 gallons a week. What's a medium-sized shrub? I don't know, not about that tall. I'm drawing a blank, I'm not a landscaper. And then drought tolerant, the really thirsty drought tolerance would be those. But you can kind of gauge that. You can kind of start it at one setting, and then you can adjust the flow to the different plants. And they are rough estimates, because it is going to change. I mean, in a really windy day, stuff dries out a lot. In a very humid day like today, what we've been getting, you know, a lot of coastal fog coming in at night, it's not going to dry out as much. But then 3 weeks ago, it was really hot, so everything was drying out. There's also different microclimates. If you're down next to the bay, it's probably a little bit moister than it is up here on the hill.
Plus we get very windy.
So it has a tendency to dry stuff out. So, like I said, sun exposure, size, type of plant, groundwater depth, there's probably a dozen more different considerations for how much water that plant needs. Like I said, you just have to gauge it. There's ways you can balance the system if you think something's not getting enough water, something's getting too much water. We'll go into that a little later. Alex? So the best plants. Fruit trees, like Graywater, a lot of nutrients in them. Excuse me. Shrubs and bushes, another good choice. Any kind of vine. Ivy, well, I know I hate ivy too. Virginia creeper, potato vine. Yeah, bougainvillea too. Large annuals, dahlias. What else we got that's annuals, Pat? Help me out. All I can think of is the dahlias. Yeah, yeah, those. And then any above ground food crops.
I mean, not potatoes.
Not potatoes. Tomatoes would be good. And you can use, they recommend not using this on any vegetables that touch the ground. But if you do like the Japanese strawberry farmers do, or the strawberry farmers, you put down visqueen, so that's what everything sits on. So you can get away with that, but they don't recommend root vegetables because they're afraid of E. coli contamination primarily. Although there's never been a recorded case of anyone getting sick from Graywater, ever. It's kind of like a wolf attack on a human being. It just doesn't happen. And then, you know, if they have large root zones, they're established. They've generally got deeper roots, so they do better with this because it is a subsurface irrigation. Yeah?
Roses?
Yes, absolutely.
Does the water tend to run acidic or basic?
It runs basic.
Okay, so you might have to add more acid to your plants then.
Well, next slide. Acid-loving plants, you do have to amend the soil. But, you know, with my, pardon me?
You have to anyway.
Yeah, you have to anyway. With my blueberries, my azaleas, I'm putting stuff in the soil to lower the pH. I always get that backwards.
You have to do it more often.
Right, you would have to do it a little more often. Not daily, but Graywater is slightly basic. So the acid-loving plants, you can talk to your
You know,
local nursery.
like alkaline, clematis likes alkaline. There are plants that like it.
Mhm.
So that's what I would.
I really haven't seen a problem. My system's been in for 5 years. Like I said, you do need to amend the soil, but pretty much amend the soil anyway, once a year. So if you can't do it on lawns because you'd have to do that above the surface. Yeah, so lawns are pretty much out. If you've got really small plants, really new plants, they don't have the root system to find this stuff. So you need to let them get established before you can water them with Graywater. Somebody had a question and said, you know, I've got a drip system in, do I need to rip that out to put in the system? The answer is no, you can leave your drip system. If you leave for a month on your European vacation, you know, you're going to want to keep watering everything. But when you're home, you just turn that section of your system off.
Why is this bad for raised beds?
Raised beds is just because it's tough to get the water to. Because you're going to have to, and I've actually been on volunteer installations where we actually put Graywater into wine barrels that had, and I said, that's never going to work, and it worked. But it's generally because you have to come up to get into the raised bed.
This is gravity flow.
Everything's gravity flow, yeah. Now, having said that, the thing about water is, as long as your source is higher than your exit, it'll flow. So your source is going to be, you know, roughly probably about here for your standpipe. So if you're coming out of ways and you're going down to a 1 foot raised bed, it'll probably work. Like I said, these couple of wine barrels, I said, no, that's never going to work, and it was flowing great. So I just shut up and stood in the corner for a while. And then root vegetables are vegetables that touch the ground. Like I said, that's what the code says. Never been a case of anybody getting sick from Graywater. But the code says don't do it. Just saying. Okay. So, what kind of stuff do you think you'd water here in this yard? Everything pretty much around here, yeah, would be good. I want to try to stay as close as possible, just because that's easier. It's less digging. Don't go uphill. That puts too much back pressure. And when I mean uphill, I mean above the outlet for the washer. Like I'm on a hill and halfway up my property is probably about 4 feet above where the standpipe for the sewer is. So that would put a lot of back pressure on the washer pump. And generally you want to irrigate larger plants. You can irrigate small plants, but generally small plants are not well established and don't have the root system to find the Graywater. Okay? So you take your estimated gallons per week you produce. Then you figure out how many plants in your yard you can irrigate based on what they require and what they are. And then think about places that you can irrigate existing landscape is probably better. Now, what I did is I ripped out the front of my yard and put in a new Graywater system. But I also have a drip backup. You can put them under flagstones, stones, you can put them under the statue of your favorite saint.
Okay, so you don't
Under
have
rocks.
to take it to the plant.
No, you don't take it right to the plant. In fact, there's something called the drip line on a plant. Generally, it's where the canopy ends.
Yeah.
You want to be just outside that drip line, because that's where the tree is going to take in the water, or the plant's going to take in the water, because as it rains, that's where it funnels it. There's lots of places you can hide these things. This one is even partially covered by the leaves of that plant. There's a lot of things you can do to hide them if you don't want to see them. Go ahead, Alex. Now, remember we said got to be 2 inches underground? Well, there's actually one under here in a mulch basin, but then this guy is not legal because it's above the surface. And this kind of shows, but there's a better slide about how you distribute it.
Do you need to label where the mulch shields are?
No, you do not. So before you start anything, make sure you have a plan, because this system can have quite a bit of digging, and if you're on a lot like mine that's 50% adobe clay and 50% big rocks, it's really tough to dig. I've got rock walls everywhere that came out of my backyard. We're talking from fist size to... you may need to go around decks, patios. You can go under them, which is probably the easiest thing to do if you don't mind shaking hands with all the spiders and bugs that are underneath. That's all right. I know it's not you. You may need to bypass some hardscape. Hardscape being cement, brick, something that's hard. Some ways to do this. I mean, obviously the washing machine here is upstairs. And there's your auto vent outside. So it can be outside, and they put it right next to this deck so they can service it. And trust me, they can go an awful long way with that system. Because that's probably got about 30 feet of head pressure, so that's probably 10 psi when it comes out. And then this is some hardscape where they just got right up next to the garden shed and came out, and then down into the yard. Go ahead. So under it, around it, take it up, cut a strip off. Slope considerations. Always protect the machine's pump. You don't want to have that serviceman coming out and charging you several $100s for replacing that thing. So I recommend 30 feet. You can go up to 50 feet under the right conditions. And keep everything 1 inch. Always keep everything 1 inch for the lint factor and no restriction on the flow. Go ahead. Do not run uphill. Refer to rule number 1. Okay. And for a downhill slope, you know, you get that stuff going in a straight pipe, it's going to be booking. It's probably not going to go out where you want it to. So you want to kind of serpentine it to slow it down. And so you've got some lateral areas that you can get it distributed to or from. And you don't want to plug the end. Once again, if something happens, say somehow this thing sucks a rag through it and gets all the way through the end, you want it to be able to get out. You don't want to be able to, you don't want that to plug up, because then you put back pressure on the pump. So you want to leave the last 1 inch opening open. So you got it first below ground. You need to have a big enough mulch basin for surge capacity, because you are going to be putting out 20 gallons in a very short period of time. So you've got to have enough area for that to leach out into. And then this is what we talked about, the drip line. This is a tree, so right here is probably where the edge of the canopy is. And then right here on this guy, this is where the mulch basin is. So there's probably partially around here, they've got a mulch basin. So rule of thumb, cubic foot of basin per gallon of water. That'll handle your surge capacity. It'll give you a lot of holding capacity. Because one of the things the mulch does 3 things. It allows you to distribute it 2 inches under the surface. It distributes the water, and it'll also hold a certain amount of that water. And as the surrounding soil dries out, it'll help keep that, the water will actually move to the drier portion. So it'll help you irrigate longer than just the one time. Okay. Again, just what I've talked about. 3 loads, 20 gallons, 10 gallons a tree, 6 trees. General rule of thumb, maybe more, maybe less, depending on the individual conditions and the individual climate. But if you're going to put 10 gallons of water on that tree, you need 10 cubic feet of mulch basin. Okay? All right? So, as you guys saw with that piece of semi-rigid pipe we passed around, it's pretty stiff. But when it heats up, it gets a lot more malleable. So what you want to do is, before you start, just put it out in the sun. It's going to heat up real great, and then it's a lot easier to work with. So lay out your plan. What I like to do when I used to put in my own sprinkler systems and when I did this is I'll take some flour and just sprinkle that along where I want to be. So that gives me a guide for where I'm going to dig. Because I've done it before. I want to dig here and end up digging this way. Mm-hmm. So you just sprinkle some flour on the ground and that's your guide for where you're going to do it. Then I'm going to go over the stuff that's in the kit. But you want to stake down the tubing every so often just so it doesn't move and just so it'll stay there before you cover it. And you do really want to cover the tubing because like I said, it's pretty similar to what they use in they used to use in solar hot water heaters. That stuff gets hot. So if it's been sitting there in the sun for a long time and you start putting water through it, as it goes through, that water's going to get hotter and hotter and hotter. And plants definitely don't like hot water. So you want to cover it with mulch. Besides, it kind of looks better. Okay. This is an example of a serpentine they did down the, and you can see they're coming off into, this will be a mulch basin, they'll fill that with mulch. But these guys are cut in, come off here, they're cut off here, this one's finished, they'll come off here. That was not quite finished, but eventually they'll cover that whole thing with mulch.
So
Yeah.
how come you can't just perforate that whole thing and have it come all the way through the mulch system? How come you have to direct feed?
A couple of reasons. If you perforate it, the plant's roots are going to clog it up. Plants will find this water. So, wherever you want to distribute this stuff, you're going to cut into that pipe and you're going to put in one of these. Just a barb connector, a 1 inch to 1/2 inch. So you're going to take this 1/2 inch tube, put it on. Recommend not going more than 2 feet, just because that's what I recommend. Longer than 2 feet, it's not going to distribute real well because you lose a lot to the friction. So you cut this guy in, slap it together, put it where you want to go.
Does it need to be glued?
Nope, that's what the barbs do. And there's no pressure in the system, so there's nothing going to cause it to move apart. In fact, sometimes it's a little hard to get these things to go on, so you can take some cooking spray, some vegetable cooking spray, put it on here to lubricate this. It'll be easy to get on, but it's still, because the barbs won't come off. And you can see how happy installing Graywater Systems make you. He's ecstatic. I think because we serve lunch there. And then to control the flow, you do want to balance the system. That's what I talked about. You've got these greenback valves. There's one example of this in your kit. And the reason we recommend these is you can see that's fully open. That's a 1/2 inch valve with a 1/2 inch opening. Other valves will have a 1/2 inch valve and then they'll neck it down to 3/8 or 1/4 inch because of through the ball. They neck it down. These are fully open. Helps without clogging. So this is the one that's all plugged up that I have to dig out. So this one, I didn't need a valve on. It was in a place where open flow was fine. But up here, I've got one of these valves. I needed to restrict it so I can get water all the way down to this one. And these are the mulch shields. This guy is about 4 by 6, just like the boxes up here. Okay. So you want to service the system once a year. Servicing the system entails flushing it out with water. Removes all the lint and hair and other stuff that just went out in your washing machine water. So in the kit you've got what I call the gray to green disconnect because I'm the one that came up with it. So you have this guy coming out of your tubing. Where's the piece of tubing anyway? Somebody pocket it? What? Oh, okay.
So this is outside.
This is outside. This is right as it comes out of the house. So you've got this guy in your tubing. You terminate with one of these on the pipe. One of these on the pipe. It's the male thread, the slip fit. So that screws into this union. This is when you're installing the system. And this guy screws into the other side. So when it's time to service the system, the union comes loose. Come on, come loose. You're left with this piece. Well, you just unscrew this piece and drop that. And then you hook on this guy, which is a 1 inch to 3/4 swivel. The other side connects to your garden hose. So you've unscrewed this, now you're free. You just put that guy on. Turn your garden hose on for 3 to 5 minutes. You flush the system. Then you find where your piece went that you dropped. And you just reverse it. You unscrew this, This is actually still on the house. So you put this guy on here. Oh, O-ring. That's probably important. Then you reconnect this, and you're right back into your Graywater system.
Do you have a picture of where that is in place?
It's actually right here. Right as you exit the building and enter the ground.
Okay.
So it's right there. Before you go into, as you go into the flexible semi-rigid pipe, that's where you put it.
Another good idea to start loading the washer so that gets flushed out too while it's open, just for a couple of minutes.
Technically you're not supposed to, but it doesn't sound like a bad idea.
Because that stuff's going to accumulate in there.
A little bit. So one of the last things you want to do is test and balance the system. So in this case you do start a load of laundry, and you look at the flows. You've got all your mulch basins open, or mulch shields open, and then you look at what your flow is. So you say, I've got way too much on my first emitter. So I'm going to neck down that valve a little bit. So I'm going to restrict the flow there, and then just keep going down the line and balancing the system that way. You can also do it with a garden hose. Just turn it on fairly low. They say you can do this. I haven't had much luck with angling it, except at the very end, which is, pretty much it's just open there anyway, the way the system's balanced. Okay, Alex? So you're going to finish up the installation. You're going to bury this stuff under mulch. You check for leaks in the house. You should paint the exposed PVC, because PVC is subject to degradation by UV. I don't know if you've ever got a piece of PVC and you try to cut it and it breaks. It's been sitting in the sun, because it gets very brittle. You want to caulk the holes going out of your house, and if you go under the ground or in your crawl space, you want to seal that guy up too, otherwise you have friends coming in. Post the signs, make sure you've got it properly labeled. Then you post the maintenance manual right by the valve, which is this guy.
One way or the other.
One way or the other, yes, choose the correct side. If you choose the wrong side, just turn it around. Make sure you've got Graywater friendly products, and then you're done. Basically do the laundry and irrigate. Now I said there's ways to go if you want to break it both ways. So you can buy one of these expensive valves, which retails for about $45, or you can get one of these, which is another greenback, a 1-inch, that's about $14. Either one of those is perfectly acceptable. This one's probably better. But like I said, you do this if you want to come out and go two ways in your system. Not real common to do, but it's legal, it's possible. The drawback is if you want to run this one time and this one the other time, you got to go out and switch it manually.
Ready?
So, finishing up the key points, only from the laundry. Got to have a 1-inch PVC pipe to prevent it from clogging. Anti-siphons at the high point. Don't store it except in a mulch basin. Use anti-mulch in landscape and leave the 1-inch end over the tubing open. What's in the kit? The 3-way valve. It's in this cool little box. You've also got two slip-to-slip elbows, 2 slip-to-threaded elbows, wherever that is. You've got a T for taking it up to your auto vent and down to your landscape. This is where it's coming from, the 3-way valve. Got a 45 in case you need it. Got a couple of couplings. 2 reasons: if you had to put 2 pieces of pipe together or you cut the pipe wrong, you can just fix it with this. Then you've got the auto vent assembly. You've got, I used them. You've got 2 of these 1-inch barb fittings. One goes to your flexible connection to the sewer. The other one goes into your outside connection in the rigid pipe. You've got 1 more of these guys that's 3/4 inch. That goes on the center port of your 3-way valve, and your washing machine hose connect to this one. You've got a couple of fittings. This is a coupling for the pipe, an L for the pipe. Oops. And then you've also got a reducing T to go from your main line down to your mulch basin. In here is your 2 hose clamps and your 2 pipe clamps with screws for the pipe clamps, no extra charge. You've got 1 non-potable water sticker to put by your washing machine is what I recommend. And this has an adhesive on the back. It's made for pipes actually. You've got the system instructions. Make sure they go the right way. You've got a couple of examples of the 1-inch semi-rigid pipe and a 1/2 inch. And you got a staple. This is an example of what you use to hold these guys down. Into the ground, it holds much better. There's none of the, oh, you've also got to male the slip so you can hook up the other 2 sections of your 3-way valve to the PVC.